transparency.
The Board of Trustees of the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District is called to order at 6:30 p.m. This is the board workshop being held on August 17th, 2021. We have a quorum with all members present. We will review the agenda items from the regular meeting being held on August the 19th, 2021. Dr. Nevins?
All right, well, good evening, board. Thank you for your
Hello.
time tonight. And so we have a rather lengthy workshop this evening because we're making some adjustments in the future. So if you bear with us, we have quite a few presentations we want to present tonight to the board for questions and then future consideration. So first, we will have our instructional report, 8B number 1A. And so we asked the Board of Trustees to approve the interlocal agreement and data sharing agreement with the University of Texas at Austin for Onramps Program and Lamar CISD. So, Mr. Bates.
All right, thank you, Dr. Nevins. Good evening, Board of Trustees. Tonight's presentation is an overview of the Onramps program, and as well as a request for approval of the interlocal agreement and the data sharing agreement between the University of Texas and Lamar Consolidated ISD. The Onramps program offers students an opportunity to earn high school, college, and high school credit as well as college credit at the exact same time through a dual enrollment, not to be confused with dual credit, which I'll explain later. Students will have the opportunity to experience and participate in high quality coursework that's very similar to what it's like to be in college. And students are also able to, students will also be taught by Lamar Consolidated employees and teachers. Those teachers receive training through the University of Texas system, the Onramps system, and as well as through support through the University of Texas professors. They get their training throughout their summer, but it's also year-long support in person as well as virtually. Of course, throughout the pandemic for over the past few years, it's mainly been virtually. But that's the best way that they are able to support the students within the classroom. Students are recognized as UT students. Actually, believe it or not, if upon request, they're more than welcome to be able to request or receive a UT student ID, and they can receive all the benefits and the membership of a UT student. They're even able to attend UT events or even games if they choose to do so. And so next on the slide is what you'll see is our historical data over the past few years with Onramps and the partnership with the University of Texas and the Onramps program. We've been partners with the Onramps program for the past 7 years, so since 2014 and 15. And as you can see, we've had a total of 597 students to participate in the program. And the number of students that actually were able to receive college credit throughout the program was 247 students. Now, the difference between this program and a traditional dual credit program, students at the end have the option to either one, receive both the credit for high school as well as college, or the students can opt to, if they do not feel like they performed up to their normal standards, they can opt to only receive the high school credit and forego the high school the college grade and college credit, making sure that they don't have a blemish on their college transcripts before they even enter college at the very beginning. Whereas dual credit, the students do not have that option to choose whether they take the grade for high school or college at the exact same time. And for this current school year, we are projected to have about 337 students to be enrolled in the Onramps program. And it's offered at all of our campuses currently for this coming school year, with the exception of Fulshire High School for this school year. But of course, we'll be looking to add that in all of our campuses in the years to come. And as what you see on the screen are the courses that have already been previously board approved that the students have the opportunity to be able to participate in. And it is, of course, English 3 in the areas of mathematics, pre-calculus, and college algebra and statistics. In the areas of science, it'll be chemistry, physics, and also in the areas of social sciences, U.S. history, and of course, arts and entertainment and technologies. Are there any questions?
After post-graduation, are they automatically enrolled as a student? Once they graduate high school,
Post-graduation, that does not automatically enroll them as a UT
because they're
student.
enrolled as a student now, they
Correct.
have to reapply and all
Yes,
that.
sir.
Why aren't you offering it at Fulshire High School?
For that, let me see if, there you go. I'd like to bring up Ms. Lindsay Trauman to be able to assist with that question.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Right now, we're currently waiting for a teacher to take on the 2-week institute at the PLI. It also requires prerequisites, just like all of our wonderful dual credit teachers. It's above and beyond what's required of a classroom teacher. So we start with that certification on the high school side, and then there's additional training. So we are in the works, but students drive all of our enrollment, and that chemistry course did not just make this year. But I know with extra advertisement and showing the kids and the parents all of these facts that we will get there.
I have another question, and this is about a program that we signed a contract with a program called Equal Opportunity Schools out of Seattle. That program, from what I understand, helps kids that would not normally live up to their academic potential go into a college program, whether it's community college or. So I'm not sure if you all are familiar with it or not, but how does the Onramps program complement that, or how does that program complement the Onramps program? Because it seems like if we're trying to get kids that not normally go to college, and we're offering that now, it seems like a great opportunity to get them on that track. And I assumed Dr. Mosich would be coming up. So
they are separate programs. This is actually part of your advanced studies piece of classes that could be offered with UT, a partner with us, like dual credit and Lone Star. So it's a separate program.
So the EOS folks in the schools, when you guys are looking at the data, you wouldn't be trying to steer them into the Onramps program?
Oh, absolutely, yes. We would look at Onramps, we'd look at dual credit, we would look at AP, all of those classes. We're looking at kids that have traditionally been misplaced or not assigned AP, that have shown, some, based upon the insight cards, that have shown a desire and teacher support to take those classes, and we would advance them into those classes, yes.
Thank you.
I just had one question, but the program made over at the new high school at Randall, wow, okay, because those are only freshmen and sophomore students. So good for them. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, so next, Mr. Bates is going to talk about a service provider agreement between Texas Child Health Access through telemedicine, we call it TCHAT, and Lamar CISD. Mr. Bates.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Nivens. Good evening once again, Board of Trustees. This next presentation is a brief overview of the Texas Child Health Access through Telemedicine Program, and also a request for approval for the service provider agreement between TCHAT and Lamar Consolidated ISD for the 21-22 school year. So as you heard me say earlier, Texas Child Health Access through Telemedicine is also known as TCHAT, and it provides students access with real-time live child psychiatrists as well as mental health nurses, practitioners. And the goal is to provide students with pre-crisis as well as post-crisis intervention for students with documented behavioral concerns. Students gain access to this program through the school nurses, and so therefore any employee can do a direct report to the school nurse. A parent, of course, can do a direct report to the school nurse, or the school nurse themselves can sign the students up to be able to gain access. Students do not receive any services without prior consent and permission from the parents, or parents must give previous consent as permission as well. Some of the services, as you can see, are provided are assessments, brief intervention, and care coordination through telemedicine and a telehealth platform, which is very similar to what we would know for our general health needs as telemedicine or, Teledoc or Wellvia. So it is free to students at no cost, free. I like that word, free. So it is free to all of our students and parents if they need to provide those services at no cost.
That's wonderful, thank you.
I had a question. How do students, it's for a limited period, so how do students transition out of that program and into a long-term provider?
Well, and I will bring up Dr. Roberts or Mr. Maxwell for a brief addition to that question. But one of the things is the students, once they start providing services, they receive up to 4 free visits, and then from there it is determined whether they need to use or to take advantage of more prescriptive services, or if the for free prescriptive services, that's a part of this is suffice enough. Is there anything like that?
Just as well as T-Chat helps make those connections with the families to other providers to ensure that they have the continued services as needed.
So will they look at their health insurance and try to find?
They help to
something?
make all those connections for the families, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
So with all the anxiety with COVID, how would students access this? What is the way that they would tap into it?
So basically what they can do is go talk to their counselors on campus, and then the counselors can set this up for them. Or they can even go to any other adult that they feel trusted in the campus, and then those staff members can always connect with the counselors to set it up through T-Chat.
Can parents contact for their children if they feel like they
Of
need the
course.
program?
Yes, ma'am.
So they need to be made aware of the program
Yes,
and how to
ma'am.
contact?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
I know, right, the way we set it up, we'll have one person up there for a minute, and then we'll rotate. So next we have Texas College Bridge Interlocal and Data Sharing Agreement.
All right. Thank you again, Dr. Nivens. Once again, Board of Trustees, good evening. This next presentation is a brief overview of the Texas College Bridge Program and request for approval of the Interlocal and Data Share Agreement Amendment. Previously, the Board of Trustees have already approved the local agreement for the Texas College Bridge, but since then there has been an amendment, and I'll share those brief updates at the very end of the presentation. The Texas College Bridge Program is a computer-based program that allows students to be able to participate and receive experiences in the areas of college prep math and the areas of college prep English language arts. This class is offered during the normal school day. It is, once again, a computer-based program, and the classroom is facilitated still with an actual teacher that is able to assist them throughout the course of the computer-based program. The teacher has been trained and received professional development through the CollegeBased the Texas College Bridge Program. And upon successful completion of the program, students are able to be exempt from the TSI, which is known as the Texas Success Initiative assessment, which most of us know as the assessment that students have to pass in order to gain college admission. It does exempt students from having to take any remedial language arts or any remedial math courses at the higher institute levels. It is accepted at 52 currently higher education institutes, which breaks down to about 10 four-year universities and 42 community colleges. This year is the initial year for the College Bridge Program, and it will be initially at Terry High School as well as Lamar Consolidated High School. As far as the amendment, it's a brief change that allows basically a lot more easier for students to be rostered and uploaded into the computer-based program, so it allows for less of a delay. For if a student enrolled today, they can actually get access to the program today without the system having to upload overnight or upload over a few days, and then there's a delay in the students actually getting access to the computer-based model. Are there any questions?
I don't think so.
All right, thank you.
Are you done?
With that presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome back again.
All right, next is we have a resolution to modify Lamar CISD student code of conduct for the 2021 school year.
All right. Thank you again, Dr. Nivens. And this presentation is a very brief presentation. It's more of a update on the new 21-22,000 student code of conduct updates that come as a result of the recent 87th legislation that came out this past summer. So previously last month, this group has approved the student code of conduct for the 21-22 school year. But inside your packet, what you will see is a list of brief modified changes for the student code of conduct to be admitted to the SEOC for this school year. And what you'll see is a list of page numbers, and it'll be described as either admissions or changes or replacements. And so it constitutes of those various page numbers, very minor changes, but once the board approves that, then we will make sure that we get those updated in both English and Spanish and posted on the website for the high school and, for secondary as well as elementary student handbooks.
The next, we'll talk about the consider to approve for renewal optional flexible school day program.
Thank you again, Dr. Nivens. Hopefully you guys are not tired of looking at me just yet. This is my final presentation for tonight. This presentation is an overview of the optional flexible school day program that we have here in Lamar Consolidated ISD, as well as a request for the renewal of the program for the 2021 school year. The optional flexible school day at the facilities, in the facility known as the 1621 place, that program houses 4 different programs that allow students to be able to gain and earn credits or to be able to gain the ability to graduate on time with their peers. They have to be identified as students that are at risk, so at risk of not graduating on time. The 4 different programs that you see listed, I actually highlight the first 3, which are the diploma programs, the rebound program, and the student success initiative. The student success program, which I believe was piloted for the first year last school year. But as far as the optional flexible school day program, the program that we're going to highlight tonight is the evening flex program, which most of us traditionally know as the night school program. This program allows students to be able to attend school in a flexible model. These are for students that traditionally have what I would call life events that prevents them from being able to attend school. I think I'll kind of leave it at that. But in order for them to be able to still graduate, they can attend this program, and it's a computer-based program as well. And students are able to work through computer modules and allow them to be able to receive credits and still be considered a Lamar Consolidated ISD graduate. Once again, the students must be considered as at risk of not graduating. This program is funded through the student's current home enrolled campus state compensatory ed. So it's a great program. It's an opportunity for students who traditionally will possibly be known as dropouts to be able to continue to graduate and actually still get training and mentoring on being able to be ready for post-secondary readiness events, whether it be the workforce or whether it be going to the military or going to post-secondary universities. Some of the goals that you can see listed on the screen is, of course, once again, to provide students an alternate route to receive a diploma. But it also does still in the program, there are 2 facilitators, there are 2 teachers that will still be able to assist the students. And the students must still meet the requirements of passing STAR, so they do receive support within the program to get students ready for the STAR assessments. And this last slide is just a list of the highlights and a little bit of data from over the past few years. So as you can see, the program has existed for the past 7 years. We've had a total of 352 graduates that otherwise probably without the program would not be. And even this past school year, throughout a pandemic, the school district was able to even recapture 27 students out of 55 students that were enrolled. 27 students were able to graduate in this night school program. So kudos to Dr. Melissa Smith, who I believe is in the audience somewhere. She'll stand for me. She is the overseer of that program, so congratulations. Any questions?
Do we automatically loan computers to these students? Sign out?
Yes, we do. This computers come from the home campus.
On the home campus?
And we have some at 1621 laptops.
This is great. We have graduation next week, yes?
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right, it's exciting.
The
Yeah.
27th is when you get.
That's great.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Well done.
Thank you all, and thank you for your patience with me.
Good job.
All right, next we have our Richmond State Supported Living Center, and Dr. Message.
Good evening. The particular one we had already passed through in the June board meeting. It is being resubmitted to add Health and Human Services Commission to the name in the agreement because it is behalf on its facility. It has ownership of that facility. The Interagency Program Agreement is for 21-22 with an addition of 2-year automatic renewals. We provided some details below. This is, again, through the years, we've had a decrease in enrollment. So in 21-22, we're anticipating 1 student. In 2021, we had 0 students. And then we had 1 student in 19-20, but we do want to ensure that we have this agreement in place so that in case that there is a need, our students can attend. in our attendance area. Do you have any questions?
Doesn't look like it, thank you.
All right, board, so next we are moving to number 2, goal planning. And so Ms. Ludwig is coming up, our CFO. So what I asked her to do, so Thursday she has to present in the public hearing of the budget and the tax rate, tax ordinance, and all those things. So I asked her to present the same thing tonight as she would present Thursday during the public hearing, to make sure that we saw that and we were able to answer any questions that we needed to ask right now for the Thursday's public hearing. And so she's going to kind of combine all these things at once as she's going to discuss in the public hearing. So, Ms. Ludwig.
Thank you, Dr. Nivens. Good evening, Board. This presentation covers items B2, A through C. First, I'd like to talk about the adoption of the 2021-22 budgets. There are 3 budgets that require official adoption by the Board of Trustees. Those are the general fund, also known as the M&O fund, debt service, also known as the INS fund, and also child nutrition. Lamar CISD adopts the budget at the functional category level. The functional category or the function code refers to the TEA's required uniform account code structure, and it describes the focus of the expenditures. Amendments that are made during the year that cross functional categories have to have board approval, just like the original budget does. First, I'd like to cover the general fund. As you can see from the slide, our budget for revenues is $375.276 million. You'll see that the biggest categories, the 3 biggest categories within this detailed list of revenues would be mostly property taxes. That would be your current year levy, your delinquent taxes, and your penalties and interest. That's the $182.6 million at the top. That's about 48.66% of revenues. The next biggest category is your state formula revenue at $167.8 million. Also right at 45% of the budget, and then another 5%, $18 million, includes your TRS on behalf payments, and that's actually just a book entry that records the revenues that the TEA actually the state of Texas contributes to the TRS plan on behalf of our employees. Combined, those 3 categories are a little bit over 98% of the revenues. I'd like to cover some information about our 2021 property values. The Fort Bend County Tax Assessor Collector officially submits certain information to the board each year. Most of the information coming from the Fort Bend Central Appraisal District. Our values were certified on July 21st this year. Part of the information that the chief appraiser provides is our certified appraised values. So our appraised and market values of all properties was about $26.8 billion. Those appraised values are reduced by such things as exemptions, productivity loss properties, various things to get to your freeze adjusted taxable value. And this year that's $18.3 billion. On top of that, we add some additional properties that are still under review by the ARB. Those we take at 96% of the value that's on the roll right now. The appraised value of those properties is a little over $254 million. The freeze adjusted taxable value of those is a little over $196 million. So to arrive at our budgetary values, we take the freeze adjusted taxable of 18.327 and add to it the 196 million you see there. And so we used the combined total of $18.523 billion when we compute our current year tax levy. As you can see, over the last 5 or so years, we've had steady property value growth. In 2016, our values were a little over 13 billion. And you'll see from the first year that we grew at 5.5% in 2017. And over the next few years, we steadily grew. And last year and the current year, our values grew at over 9%, 9.8% specifically into the current year. And that gives you also our 18.5 billion. On the expenditure side of the budget, you'll see that it's balanced at the $375.276 million. You'll see the biggest categories of expenditures are payroll and benefits, and also professional and contracted services. Those two categories make up about 93% of the budget. I'll be discussing the compensation plan next, which is part of your 6,100 payroll costs. The compensation plan is also an action item, and you'll see that it begins on page 366 of your book, and the compensation plan includes all positions that are authorized by the Board of Trustees. It also includes the rates of pay for supplemental duties and part-time employees. The schedules that are included in the compensation plan are the teacher hiring schedule. You'll note that that's a 10-month salary, and the beginning salary this next year will be $59,500, which equates to a little over $318 a day. The book also includes our pay grade tables, the stipends, athletic events and concession pay, fine arts event rates, also rates for guest instructors, administrators, and paraprofessionals, and also part-time employees. Within our budget this year, we've included various raises. There's a flat raise of $1,950 for all those employees that are paid according to the teacher hiring schedule. That equates to an average of 3%. We also have a 3% of midpoint raise for all non-teaching positions that are paid according to the pay grade tables. Also included and relating to the pandemic, we have some incentive pay categories. We're adding $50 a day in additional funds for instructional positions that are guest instructors, teachers, and paraprofessionals, and then also an incentive rate for remote conference instructors and teachers, and that rate will be $200 a day. You'll find that information on page 384. It's also page 19 of the compensation plan itself. Other big ticket expenditures include salaries in total of $262.187 million, $56 million in benefits, $10 million in utilities, little over $2 million in property and liability insurance, and a little over $2 million in the Fort Bend Central Appraisal District and tax collection fees. Moving on to the debt service fund, you'll see it's also balanced at $82.184 million, with 94% of the revenues coming from property taxes, current year, delinquent, and then penalties and interest. Our bond principal, interest, and fees for the year are estimated at $82.184 million. The Child Nutrition Fund is also a balanced budget. It is self-sustaining and supported by breakfast, lunch, and a la carte sales, as well as federal reimbursements. You'll see revenues and expenditures equaling $17.544 million. And of course, your two largest categories are payroll and benefits and supplies and materials. Continuing on, I'll talk a little bit about our proposed tax rate for 2021. It has to be adopted by ordinance, and it contains two components: the M&O rate of 0.8722 cents and an INS rate, which funds the debt service fund, of 0.37 or 37 cents, for a total tax rate of 1.242. right at $1.24. You'll see from the graph or chart that right now we're at a 10-year low tax rate with the $1.24 that's proposed. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
I guess guest instructors, does that mean substitutes?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was.
Yes.
So they did get an increase this year?
There's a $50 incentive per day for substitutes, yes.
In the long-term,
Also, it applies to them as well.
good,
I just want to say that I think that this goes to say, to prove that Lamar is a destination district when we can pay a person straight out of college $59,500. That's not a bad salary right out of college.
Right.
benefits.
And that's right, and that's really a testament to Dr. Randall and all of you guys who've been here a long time.
We are very competitive with our neighboring districts, for sure.
And keeping the tax rate low.
Yes.
Yes, well, helping the
And
tax
we're
rate.
competitive with our tax rate, too.
Yes. Any questions, other questions? Thank you so much for
I
your
think,
hard work.
I think,
Oh,
One
sorry.
question. I know that there's an information item for virtual learning, but is there also going to be a discussion of the funding for that on Thursday?
We can, but we're really looking at using our ESSER funding for that.
I know at the budget committee meeting, we talked about presenting some options.
Yes, yeah, the options will be presented tonight, along with the funding source will be presented tonight.
Thank you.
I think I'm up next, too.
Okay.
I think I'll stay here.
Just walk away, come right back in.
So next, Ms. Ludwig will talk about commitment of fund balance as of August 31st, 2021.
All right. Each year, our financial statements present fund balance. And fund balance as a whole is made up of several different components. You've got your reserves, commitments and assignments. GASB 34, Governmental Accounting Standards Board, actually sets all of the rules and requirements for how we present things in our financial statements. And GASB number 54 prescribes the categories and the terminology used to describe the components of fund balance. The Board of Trustees has to formally commit fund balance, but the board has previously delegated to the superintendent and the chief financial officer the ability to make other assignments or reserves of fund balance. The resolution that you're being asked to approve in this particular meeting includes several different commitments. One, there's a reserve for self-insurance. Self-insurance would be our health insurance program and our workers' comp plan. That would be to cover any deficits that might occur in either of those funds. Also, there's a reserve for child nutrition fund deficits. We don't anticipate any, but if there is one, a deficit, the general fund would then have to cover that as well. But we're proposing a reserve of $500,000 for that. Then also, a continuing reserve that we've had over the last few years is $3.2 million, which represents about 2 cents on our tax rate, which we would transfer to the debt service fund should we need those funds. We don't anticipate needing that either, but there is, we do recommend reserving those 3.2 cents. That originated several years back when we decreased the INS rate in order to keep the total tax rate low. The assignments of fund balance, as I spoke about earlier, will be made by the superintendent and myself after we finish closing books for the 2021 year. but prior to release of our financial statements. Typically, the types of assignments we make are for encumbrances, which are POs and things that exist as of August 31st, that we'll still be responsible for in the next fiscal year. There's a few other types of reserves that we might make, but they're not material. It's mainly just the encumbrances. And that's all I had. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Ms. Logan, I have a question. So on the reserves for the health plan for the self-insurance, in the budget committee meeting that we had, where we're allocating some of the, or considering allocating some of the ESSER funds for that, are we basing our reserve off of that, or was that an exceptional year that we're not need to?
This year, at this point in time, we don't expect to actually commit any funds because we're hoping to clear the deficit through some of our ESSER funding or funding within the general fund. If we can go ahead and cover it within our regular operations, we do that, and then we don't have to reserve or commit any more money.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? You staying or you leaving? You're leaving?
I think I'm done.
Thank you.
So next we'll have, consider approval of nomination of candidate for the position of CASD Board of Directors. And so board, in your book, you'll see a letter from Dr. Darlene Bro from A-Leaf ISD. And so it's really just a conversation and questions about Dr. Darlene and if we want to nominate her to serve for us as a CASD board member. And so that's something we can have further discussion about on Thursday. Next, we have discussion and approval of proposed dates for regular board meetings for 21-22 school year. And so, board, as you see, we are trying to move to a once-a-month board meeting. And in looking at the data, what Ms. Vossick did was we looked at Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. And we saw that Mondays, we had quite a few conflicts with holidays. Thursdays was always a conflict because we always have activity, a game on Thursdays. And so every Tuesday was pretty much clear. And so we're proposing that we move our board meetings to Tuesday, the third Tuesday of the month. So any questions on that?
Dr. Nivens, could you explain to the public what we're going to be doing, why we're getting rid of the workshop and what the purpose of the workshop has been and how we will combine that into one meeting a month?
So the purpose of the workshop has been for the board to ask questions. And we've had 2 meetings a month. And so in my experience, I think you can get the same amount of work done in 1 meeting per month and give people back time. And so the way this agenda is set up is to have something called future action items. And so typically what happens is the board would get their packet on Friday. This got this last Friday. And then tonight, so from Friday to tonight, they would have been expected to go through this entire packet. I'll just hold it up.
It's a big one.
It's a big one.
They would have been expected to go through this entire packet Friday. Well, I can close it and show you that.
Is yours a big, okay, yeah, the
Yeah.
same size then. Making sure we get the full effects. Yeah.
Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then come here tonight, be prepared to ask questions about all this activity, and then be prepared to vote on it on Thursday. And so my philosophy is to give the board, our governing body, as much time in between meetings to really digest the information, talk to their constituency if they need to, and really have a clear understanding about what we're asking to vote on. So with that being said, tonight we'll have future action items. And so those future action items will be action items for the September meeting. So now you have a whole month to really look at that information, digest it, ask as many questions as you need, and so when we come to the meeting, you're able to make a decision with your conscience free, with all the information that you need. And so in my opinion, and in my experience, we can do all that in a one board meeting per month and give everyone back time. We all know time is precious. And so, and I've said to the staff many times, and I've said it, you know, there's nothing wrong with trying it, and if it doesn't work, we just tweak it. But if it does, then great, we're able to give everybody back time to continue to move forward and to continue to do what we need to do to serve kids.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
If something between the month, like tonight and Tuesday in September, something comes up that needs to be on the agenda, do we still have that opportunity to put something on the September agenda if we need to?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
Okay.
we still have the opportunity to put stuff on the agenda. I know the president can, or any two board members can.
Right.
But the
But I
goal
mean,
is.
even the minute, if something pops up that needs to have approval, like
Yes.
with
So-
facilities or something,
So if the team needs to, it would have to be dire.
okay.
And so, because again.
That's put a lot of
because
pressure on me.
The objective is to give you time to digest the information. And so I know, maybe in June, we had to put an item on really quickly because a chiller went out at Terry High School.
Right.
And we need to get that approved quickly so it can be ready for school next week. So something like that, if that happens, then yes. But if it's something that we can plan for and make sure that we do what we need to do, then no.
So this
we
is
won't.
there is some flexibility in this process.
There is some flexibility, but it would need to be pretty dire for us to do
Okay.
that. The goal is not to ask you to look at something and then approve it shortly after.
Right.
The goal is to ask you to look at it and then take your time before we ask you to approve it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. And so with that being said, we do have to change our board policy. So board policy BE has specific time in our board policy. And so what we're basically doing is removing a specific time of a board meeting so we can make sure that no matter what we do, as long as the meeting is scheduled according to the Open Meetings Act, that we're in full compliance with our policy. And so that's what that change is about. Any questions on any of that? No? Okay, all right. Next, we will have Mr. Junty. And Mr. Junty will ask for a deductive change order and final payment for Brazos Crossing exterior improvements.
Good evening, members of the board and Dr. Nivens. I'd like to share a couple action items with you from the facilities and planning section. First is requesting you to consider and approve a deductive change order and the final payment for the Brazos Crossing exterior improvements. Our substantial completion on the project was achieved on February 24th, 2021. The original contract sum was $1.53 million. The new contract sum is $1.526101. So that's a change order amount and savings of $3,899. So it was highlighted because we came in under budget and we got to do a lot of good things for this building.
Good job.
General contractor was Sterling Structures, and it does bear mentioning they did a terrific job. Any questions?
And it looks wonderful too. Yeah.
It not only looks wonderful, when we have rain, it stays outside the building.
No more umbrellas inside.
No.
And I like underbelly.
Questions?
There you go.
All right, next we'll have consider approval for procurement methods for the remaining 2020 bond projects.
Again, thank you. This evening, we're coming to you. The Facilities and Planning Group met with our architects that we typically use in the district and got feedback on procurement methods for the 2020 bond. Given the prevailing situation we have in terms of construction contracts and availability of resources, the recommendation was made through a joint communication that the majority of our projects in the 2020 bond be the CSP method, or the competitive seal proposal. There will be a couple exceptions to that, and they're actually in the board book. One is we're going to go with the construction manager at risk for the Terry High School and George Junior High renovation. One of the reasons that we do that is that that affords us some more flexibility for an occupied space, because that renovation takes place over a period of time while students will be and staff will be in the building. So our CM at risk works better in those situations sometimes. The other is to consider approval for a cooperative purchasing agreement in the procurement method for a few projects: our technology IDF, MDF rooms, our Jackson Elementary special needs playground, transportation video, and security fence projects. Those will be done through an interlocal agreement, through purchasing cooperatives that we have, and through job contracting. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
All right, board, so next, we have on the agenda discussion and possible action to revise our district's 21-22 COVID-19 protocol. So I know we have some public comment tonight, and we will hear those. We're gonna move that discussion and possible action to Thursday night to have, but I wanna make sure that anyone that's here to have public comment, just hold tight for us, and we'll make sure that those comments are heard. But we're gonna move that to Thursday night to have that complete and total discussion and possible action to make sure that we give it enough time. So next we have our preliminary 2021 STAR performance update. Dr. Massa.
Thank you, Dr. Nivens, Board of Trustees. I'm presenting you this evening the preliminary data sets for performance from the spring of 2021 STAR and EOC exams. TA has announced that the official data tables for 2021 will be posted on Friday, August 27th. In reviewing the preliminary data as a whole, it is clear that some of our most struggling campuses had between a 10 to 20 point decrease in performance, where traditionally less struggling campuses demonstrated a 5 to 10% decrease. The most concerning areas of performance that you will see for the district is math, with overall concerns at the junior high level. High school documents the least loss in performance, with the exception of Algebra 1, which is also true across the state of Texas. We credit the limited decrease to a strong foundation of our students in the K through 8 program in previous years. Each slide in the presentation will represent the performance of a student group with at least 10 students. These student groups are all students, economically disadvantaged, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian, Black African American, Hispanic, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, 2 or more races, white, first-year monitoring, LEP, otherwise known now as emerging bilingual, second year of monitoring, and special education. The estimated participation rates for the spring of 2021 STAR administration were for math at about 88%, and for ELAR, we documented the overall, excuse me for just 1 second. We documented a 90% for ELAR with an overall 89.24 for overall participation. Now, for 89.24, that is a drop when you compare it to 2019, which was a 99% participation. So I will go forward now in the presentation of our data tables. Again, this is a preliminary data set. The official data tables will be posted on August 27th. Beginning with math overall, when we look at STAR and EOC, you can see in this particular area that all student groups, with the exception of Asian, white, first-year monitoring, and second-year monitoring, showed drops of over 10%. And again, that's collective math from the 3rd grade through the EOC exams. ELAR, we fared a little bit better as we tested last year, with only one particular area in ELAR showing a greater than 10%, which is American Indian, Alaskan Native. As we look at writing for all assessments, economically disadvantaged are Black, African American, Hispanic, 2 or more races, and second-year monitoring all also saw a 10% decrease, an over 10% decrease. And then with science, economically disadvantaged, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Black, African American, Hispanic, 2 or more races. As we transition to social studies, we did not see a drop in performance as we saw in the others. We did see a drop, but not as big as what we saw in the other areas. I'm going to break it down now into the different grade levels and content areas that you can see in grade 3. Our most concerning right now is grade 3 math, which is our Black and African American students with over a 20% loss. All students, economically disadvantaged, Asian, Hispanic, 2 or more races, and LEP and special ed also had a greater than 10% loss. Reading fared better across the 3 through EOC testing season. With 3rd grade, we only had 2 areas in reading, Asian and 2 or more races, that showed a greater than 10% loss. We look at mathematics again, very concerning for grade 4 in our Black and African American students with a 21% loss in 4th grade math. With all students, our economically disadvantaged Asian, Hispanic, and LEP showing a greater than 10% loss that you can see documented. And let me also mention that I am focusing currently right now on our approaches and not focusing on the meets and masters at this point. So what you see on these slides also is articulated where we are for meets and masters. But when you look collectively at the data, you are going to see a decrease in those areas as well. As we look at 4th grade reading, again, we're seeing the same type of trend. We're staying a little strong from the reading perspective, with economically disadvantaged in grade 4 reading and 2 or more races showing a greater than 10% loss. And we look at math, again, the trend in what you're seeing in the other areas are concerning for our Black and African American students with a 21% loss, and our special ed population at a 24% loss, with all students economically disadvantaged, Hispanic, and LEP showing greater than 10%. With reading in 5, this was an area that we did see some significant loss in the area for grade 5 reading. So particularly in our special ed with over 21%, and then you can see in the other areas, with the exception of Asian, white, 1st year monitoring and 2nd year monitoring, we also in grade 5 reading saw a 10% drop, or over 10%. Grade 6 math, again, it's a very small group is concerning, but we had 12 American Indian, Alaskan Natives that had over a 25% loss. That small number is really, from each number, is pretty mathematically significant, so sometimes that data can look very skewed. With economically disadvantaged, our Hispanic population and special ed also showing a greater than 10%. Grade reading, again, the trend, our kids are doing better in that area of reading. And so again, American Indian for 6th grade showing that greater than 10% loss. Grade 7 math was very concerning. And so 2 critical areas are our economically disadvantaged students and our Black and African American students with over 20% losses in grade 7. All students, Asian population, Hispanic, 2 or more races, and our white population also showed over a 10% loss there. I want to make a note in this, though, that also this is a very different grade level for mathematics at the junior high. Advanced kids take a compacted curriculum at 6th grade, where they take a portion of the 6th grade and half of 7th grade. 7th grade, they're taking a half of the 7th grade and all of 8th grade, testing at 8th grade, and algebra at 8th grade. So it is a different set, population set. 7th grade reading, again, fared better than what we saw, particularly in math within the district. And our 1st year monitoring students actually saw a gain of over 10%, with economically disadvantaged and Hispanic students having less than a greater than 10% loss. 8th grade math, again, junior high performance is concerning collectively, with economically disadvantaged, Black, African American, Hispanic, LEP, and special ed also over 20% losses in grade 8 math. Grade 8 reading, all student populations with the exception of Asian, white, first-year monitoring, and LEP also showed a 10% loss from previous scores. Before I begin to the next one, I'm going to go into the EOC for high schools. And what we saw collectively in the data is that high schools did not see the drop didn't see the drastic drop that you'll see in the other data sets. But we did see that in Algebra 1. It got hit heavy, but that was across the state. So when you take a look at Algebra 1, our second year monitoring kids had over a 21% loss, but we did see collective losses across the board for Algebra 1. When you compare that, though, to the next two slides, it's going to make a little bit more sense. Well, biology did not see, this particular slide also did not see a significant loss. We did see a loss of learning, but not significant as we saw in 3 through 8 in math particularly. English 1 and 2 were very different. We saw gains. You can see the gains that have been in the approaches area as well as the meets and the masters area in English 1. LEP and our special ed indicator saw a greater than 10% increase. And these are traditionally your 9th grade students in an English 1 class with other kids that might be retesters that have not passed yet. With English 2, again, we saw the same trend. A lot of green and not as much drop as what we had seen in the other earlier grades. 2 or more races, first year monitoring, and LEP all showed a 10%, over a 10% increase. U.S. history also did not see a decrease collectively that we saw in some of the other areas. I'm going to pause real quick. That was a lot of information. Do you have any questions before I begin on just to give you a little bit of the HB 4545 legislation? Yes, sir.
What you saw on English EOCs, is that consistent throughout the region and the state?
Well, in just a few minutes, I'm going to actually show you where we landed in the region to give you a perspective, because collectively, a lot of us did see some concerning scores. And so we're still pretty strong in compared to some of our regional areas with some particular content areas that are still concerning.
What do you attribute, I mean, we saw a lot of red, and then all of a sudden we saw a lot of green. What do you attribute the green to?
I think that when you look at high school students, again, you're looking at foundation, and you're looking at reading. It is something that is cross-curricular a lot of times. When you start looking at the virtual and how school was disrupted last year, doing virtual instruction for math can be challenging. Kids traditionally are reading. They're reading very young age at an iPad, iPhone, all of those things. And I think that to some extent they're better prepared than from mathematics point of view. I think the disruption hurt from mathematics. And we saw that again through the state.
Is another way to say that virtual learning is not good for academic learning mathematically?
I cannot say that definitively, Mr. Welch, but what I can say is that our scores in regard to mathematics with the disruption last year are concerning for math, and that could be a contributing factor.
The virtual.
Yes, sir.
We can also say, Mr. Welch, that most students need to be in a physical classroom in the building, most students. Some students can perform well virtually. It would be naive of us to believe that every single child will perform well in a given setting. Every single kid needs a different setting. But we can say that most students need to be in a physical classroom with the teacher every single day, also amongst their peers, learning some social and emotional skills as well. And so virtual instruction has hurt quite a few of our students. I can say that.
So to sum up, probably if the question is, once children have a foundation, they might be able to move towards different types of learning structure or virtual, but without that foundation, that it's hard to get that foundation for some children virtually.
I would believe that to be true, yes.
So that's why you see the differences in elementary and secondary.
Yes. Particularly at the high school level, I think it's indicative in the high school performance when you look at the same kids, those kids testing last year. House Bill 4545, just wanted to add this just a little bit so that you see kind of the responses that we will be doing with testing and these performance levels. But legislation was passed in this last session, and so this includes the elimination of the grade retention and testing requirements in grades 5th and 8th, and that any student who does not pass the STAR test in grades 3, 5, or 8 in math or reading, the LEA, Local Education Authority, requirement is to establish a accelerated learning committee, to develop an individual educational plan for the student and monitor their progress throughout the year. Learning acceleration for those particular students who did not pass and that are not in those area grade levels of 3, 5, and 8. If you did not pass a STAR or EOC, you must receive supplemental instruction, i.e. tutoring, before or after school or embedded in the school day for 30 hours of tutoring for each content area: math, ELAR, science, and social studies. That is 30 hours throughout the year for each of those content areas.
So in essence, board, that means that if a student failed multiple subjects, they would need 30 hours per subject. So that's just to clarify that.
Who's keeping track of that 30 hours per student? Is that the individual teacher? Or
The
is that
campus and the
campus?
Accelerated Learning Committee or the administration, yes, and the teacher.
What if students didn't take the STAR? Do they have to be evaluated in some way too?
Yes, they do, because right now they would be considered not passing.
Oh,
Who's those 30 hours reported to?
Excuse me, could you?
Those 30 hours, like, who do we do we have to report that to someone?
Correct. We will collect that data at the campus
At the
level
campus
through the
level.
committees and through the plans that are developed.
So is that, I don't want to say like an honor system and stuff, it's like that the school's gonna be diligent to get that done for each student, but is there anything beyond the campus that has to be reported to, like legally?
Well, legally to us
To us,
and
okay,
to the
yeah.
area superintendents, to myself, that would be the
Right.
accountability and the follow-up and ensuring that this is being implemented with fidelity.
Perfect.
The numbers, wanted to make sure that you could see the numbers as we look at currently right now, 8,741, with an estimated possible tutoring cost of 1.7 million if we were looking at just tutoring outside the school day or before and or after school. And we are moving towards paying teachers before or after school, if it's not embedded within the day, to be able to implement this tutoring. Any questions on HB 4545 that I can answer?
So that funding is coming from the state? Is that,
This funding for HB 4545, no, there's not any additional funding for this currently right now. This would be coming through local budget, state comp ed funds, ESSER funding sources, title campus funding, special ed, LEP. It'll be a number of budgets that will be paying for this.
so what would cause a student to have to do before or after school tutoring versus during the day? Just the student schedule?
Yes, sir. Yeah, a lot of our campuses, I think, a lot of our campuses are doing intervention time throughout the day, and they will do some type of rotation or change their bell schedule to be able to provide the tutoring. One caveat to this tutoring that I need to also mention that's not highlighted there is that it is a 1-to-3 ratio. So teacher to 3 kids. Unless the parent would sign off to expand that number.
We got a question from Ms. Danson.
Oh, I am sorry.
I'm just thinking, with as much work as a lot of teachers do during the day, would you or could you consider a part-time or substitute of retired teachers or teachers that have left to come back to help do this tutoring?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
She's in.
No, I just know a lot of people.
You know.
I know people.
I've given you a lot of information on really, looks really dire, and I understand that. But I also want to provide you where we are from other regions that we know, again, with preliminary, so that you can see a perspective. Take a look at third grade math. We're still number 3 in all of the areas when you start looking at these different districts. Approaches, meets, and masters. Grade 3 reading, we're still number 3. Approaches, meets, and masters. When we begin to look at grade 4, 3 approaches, 3 meets, and 4th in masters. So we're staying strong. In reading, again, grade 4, you can see the comparison to the other districts, again, with preliminary data of 3 for Lamar, 3 for approaches, meets, and then 5th in looking at masters. You can see where we are in regard to grade 4 in writing, again, staying strong in number 4 in approaches. Took a little bit of a drop at the 5th with meets and masters in the writing area. Number 3 that you can see for grade 5 in math when you look at the other districts. And then below at the very bottom of these tables, you will also see where the state and the region with preliminary data is looking. Then you look at grade 5 in reading, and we can reflect back to our own reading performance that I showed you in the previous table. We're at number 4 for approaches, dropped to 5 in meets, and then 5 in the master's category for grade 5. 6, we're looking at 5 at approaches for, for science, and that is pretty much consistent across the board. We're in the middle of the pack, but still higher than the state and the region. 6th grade math, we're at 3 when compared to other across the board. We look at reading, a little bit lower in regard to 4 in approaches. When we look at the others, at number 5 in meets and number 4 in master's category. And then this is where we understand that we have some critical concerns, is that 7th grade writing piece, where we are actually below the region in approaches, as well as below the state in meets, and then very low in regard to masters. Our 7th grade reading, you can see how it's documented, again, middle of the pack, higher than the region and the state, but pretty consistent across the board in approaches, meets, a little higher in masters. With writing, number 4 with approaches, number 2 in the meets category, and number 2 in the masters area. And again, the region and state is at the very bottom. Grade math, 8th grade math, though we were really concerned about our performance, you can see at number 3 it approaches when we start looking at other districts, meets at 3, and masters. And then with reading in 8th grade, again, we did witness and we did document that concern in the in 8th grade reading. And we're lower in this particular area and closer to the region in all meets, approaches, and masters. Science, again, the middle of the pack at about 5th for approaches, and meets at 4 with masters at 4 compared to some of the other districts. Social studies still strong at about 5th for approaches, 3rd in the meets category, and 3rd in masters. Algebra 1, we said we had some significant challenges within Algebra 1. You can see us currently at kind of closer to the region 4 in the approaches area, middle of the pack with meets and then masters. Biology at the 5th area for approaches. When we look at 5th in meets, as well as a little bit lower when we start looking at the masters, but still well above the state and the region. English 1, we're consistently at about, even though we saw the gains, we still have some catching up to do with some of the other school districts. where we are at currently looking at fifth for approaches and meets, as well as our master's area, with English 2 at about that same rate compared to some of our district friends. It's still higher than the region and state. U.S. history, middle of the pack here, again, for approaches, meets, as well as masters. It's a lot of information. Any questions on that part?
Are we going to get an 80 rep accountability rating this year?
No, sir.
So that would restart with the data for this year?
Yes. Yeah, we will test the data set that we will have. We'll have the updated, remember this is preliminary data, and then it will be uploaded in August, on August 27th, what are the data tables, but we will not be rated until next year is what we're anticipating.
Oh, it's a question for what Ms. Danziger asked about the retired teachers and subs. Can that be an avenue that we can use to, request volunteers? And we know mentors, mentee, that relationship can benefit from, the tutoring and all that. Does that have to be someone that's employed by the district to tutor, or can that be?
It's going to have to be somebody that is trained specifically in the type of tutoring that we need to offer.
Okay.
And so it's going to be a very structured tutoring program. And so it will not be the traditional program. A kid is after school, they need some assistance in their schoolwork, those types of things, and they might go to tutoring with their teacher. Mm-hmm. This is going to be based upon what are their learning difficulties. Mm-hmm. And it's going to have to focus on those learning difficulties of the kids. So it will be very strategic. And if the kid does not meet at the end of this year, then we reevaluate the plan and we implement it again moving forward into the next school year.
Do you anticipate too many surprises out of the preliminary to the final?
We do not. That is not something that we're seeing in other districts. The preliminary kind of our data, what we're hearing is it's going to be pretty consistent. But
Okay.
you never know. That's why I keep saying it's preliminary. So we do not anticipate that.
Anything blowing up? Okay.
So, Board, I asked Dr. Masters to go into a lot more detail in this. That's why our presentation was longer, because I really want the board to have a clear understanding of where we lie right now academically. But I also want to bring up a couple of points and really celebrate our teachers and our school administrators, because when you looked at that data, for the most part, Katie and Conroe were 1, 2, and then we were number 3 for most of those. We don't look like Katie and Conroe. Lamar CISD is a very diverse school district. That just simply means that, when you have students that have more needs from home, that means the teacher has to do more to get those students to learn, right? And so that means that we have a lot of teachers in Lamar CISD doing more than just teaching ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. They're actually, I keep saying, they're actually speaking life into kids. They're making sure students walk into the building and that they are prepared and ready to learn regardless of where they come from. And so I just really want to give a testament to the staff that's been here, because to still be number 3 behind Katie and Conroe after a year that we've all experienced is a huge testament. Mm-hmm. And so I keep saying to the team that Lamar CISD is prime, prepped, and ready to be a national blue ribbon school district. I'm not saying have it a blue ribbon school. I'm saying to be a school ribbon district, because of the talent and the staff that we have in our school system. And even the others, Clear Creek was ahead of us a little bit, and Cy Fair was ahead of us in some areas. We don't look like any of those school districts. So as long as we continue to do what we need to do and what's best for our staff so they can do what's best for kids, we're going to continue to move forward. But we want to show that data and not sugarcoat it, because the COVID slide is real. We have some groups, 20-point slide. And so that's the real deal, and that doesn't happen overnight to get those students back on track. But the silver lining is that we're still performing well in the grand scheme of things. So thank you, Dr. Masters, and to the instructional team that's been here, and to all of our teachers and professional support, everyone, for doing such a phenomenal job during a stressful time.
Well said.
Can I ask just one more question? You might not have this answer.
Yes,
Do we
ma'am.
have any idea what the percentage of students did not take STAR in our district last year? That should have,
Correct. We had collectively, if we calculate that for math and reading, we had an 89.24% participation rate. Traditionally, it's 99% plus, and so about 10%. Yeah.
but that can
It's
make
not
a
bad,
difference in
yes.
some of your scores. Okay.
Next up, virtual instruction.
Yay.
Key points of virtual instruction, kind of highlight some areas in regard to some discussion points with the possibility of offering virtual instruction, is it would be a program for limited number of students enrolled in kindergarten through 6th grade. This program would not allow for traditional ADA funding from the state, and ESSER funds will need to be utilized. Once again, is that the virtual instruction program would have to be funded with our ESSER funds because state aid or state ADA funding would not provide for it.
Dr. Mossy, can you tell everybody what ESSER funds are, just for the
Correct.
folks that may not know what that means?
They are federal funds that we're getting for responding. You want to give the definition, Jill? Oh, Jill is not here.
Close enough, just so I know what they are, you know.
No,
Basically,
Yvonne-
they're funding sources to help districts.
Yvonne is here.
Oh, Yvonne?
You're up.
I just think moving forward would be helpful.
They're federal funds that we're receiving to supplement the loss due to COVID.
Thank you.
Yvonne said it better. Acceptance, as we're seeing it currently right now, would be based on the following number system. Number 1, immunocompromised household member documented by a physician licensed to practice in the United States. Number 2, an anxiety disorder documented by a physician licensed to practice in the United States, or other K through 6 students where families are anxious about sending students to school due to anxiety surrounding COVID-19. The requirements would look as follows. Students commit to an entire semester for the program for 6th grade students, and then through the end of the ninth week period for K through 5. And students would not be able to participate in extracurricular activities or clubs on the campus. And then students who are not academically successful in the virtual offering after documented support would be required to return to on-campus learning. Our immunocompromised students would continue to be served by our homebound services. Programming would begin in September and would continue for a semester or longer, depending upon the status of COVID in our community, as well as the availability of vaccines for students under 12. And the delay in programming is due to the mobilization of appropriate staff for this program. Specifics of the program continue to be developed and will heavily rely on asynchronous models of instruction with limited synchronous activities throughout the week with an assigned teacher. Particular cost figures in looking at funding and enrollment options, we're looking at $3.5 million with 1,000 students for one semester. At a 1:30 ratio, we are looking at 33 teachers for an all-day program, or 17 teachers for an AM or PM session with a teacher class load of possibly 60. That would be different for 6th grade because it would be closer to possibly the 150, depending upon the grade levels, because secondary classes are a little bit different than the elementary level. 10.5 million, 3,000 students. First semester, 1:30 ratio. 100 teachers would be needed for this program all day. If we did an AM or PM session, we're looking at 50 teachers with, again, a teacher class load of possibly 60, or $14 million with 4,000 students in a first semester at a 1:30 ratio with 133 teachers for all day, or 67 teachers in AM or PM session with a teacher class load of possibly 60. Additional costs would include or could include hiring of additional staff, asynchronous programming needs, professional development, and technology. Do you have any questions?
How much did we get in ESSER funding, or do we know yet?
That's a loaded question. I'm not gonna. There's multiple parts to it.
I know. I'm just trying to see, because that's where this program would be funded from,
Yes, ma'am.
and possibly our tutoring
So
program.
I don't have the exact numbers with me right now, but ESSER 3 was about 30 million, we received 20 upfront. ESSER 2, we have 14.54 million.
Okay.
And these funds have to be used, if I understand it correctly, within 3 years, is that correct?
Some of them are different, right? Some of them are 2 years, some of them are 3 years.
ESSER 2 was through 2023, and ESSER 3 was 2020.
20, okay, I'm sorry.
I have several questions, as I'm sure we all do. Can you explain the all-day versus the half-day? What that would look like for a individual teacher?
Well, a teacher would look at, they'd have a morning class from, let's say, 8 o'clock to maybe 12, and then have an afternoon class of another set of kids from like 1 o'clock to possibly 5 o'clock. So 4 hours of time, or 12:30 to 4:30. And so 4 blocks of time, 2 blocks of time.
Would these be teachers that this is their only assignment for the year, is to teach, or the semester to teach virtually? They would not be doing in-classroom part of the day and virtual part of the day. Is that correct?
That is what we believe at this time, yes. We would not do concurrently. We could not do that again, if that is what you're asking. Or we would have to, we're having to look at the staffing and how that would work.
So school begins on August the 23rd. From what I read in here, our board book, the families would be notified the 27th of August.
Originally, we were set to do that. There has been some additional conversations in regard to, our intention is at the end of next week to be able to announce that, yes.
At the end of the first week of school.
Yes, yes, sir.
And when would the program begin?
September, we're still determining the date because it's going to take a little bit to mobilize our staff to get prepared to serve the kids.
So that begs the question, the folks that really want this, they're fearful they have an autoimmune deficient person in the house. What do they do on August the 23rd with their student? Because August 23rd, there's not virtual learning available.
Correct.
But that's the first day of school in Lamar.
Yes, and so as we begin to open up our learning program, if we choose to do virtual learning, we're going to have to compact some of the curriculum on some of the times that they did lose, days that they've lost, maybe 2 weeks, to front load that or back load, however you want to look at it, when they start coming in September.
So they don't send their kids to school on the first day if they're really concerned?
Correct.
They just wait until?
Yes.
Well, but they're not going to be notified, though, until the end of the first week of school.
Yes, sir.
Am I missing something?
Well,
No, you're not,
okay.
you're not.
So-
So what we're gonna do, we're working with our communications team, and so what I wanted to do was make sure we had a conversation with the board this week to get a consensus and some guidance, and then our communications team will send out some information at the end of the week to all parents that are interested in it, and giving some guidelines as to what will come up next. And so everyone will hear what will come up next before the first day of school. And so we'll send out a message to parents and say, if you're interested in virtual learning, this will probably go out Friday. If you're interested in virtual learning, these are the steps that you will take. You won't report on the 23rd. This is the date that we'll start it, and that information will come out on Friday for all parents interested in it.
Well, that raises another question. So you got a family that really wants it, they're denied for whatever reason, and their kid hadn't been going to school on the 23rd. What happens to that academic time that they missed?
Well, that's where we begin to, again, the academic time, and we start looking at our curriculum, and we know how our curriculum is laid out. And so the teachers that would be assigned those kids would begin to compact that curriculum, meaning they're going to have to take kind of the key learning targets, kind of push them together, and then be able to teach them kind of what they missed and that. And we believe that we'd be able, is that not what you're asking?
No, he means a kid that, let's say they aren't accepted into the virtual program, but they haven't gone to school for the first 2 weeks because they thought they might get accepted into the virtual program, but they didn't.
So now they're 2 weeks behind all the
So
other
now they're
kids.
2 weeks behind.
Got you, okay.
they
Yes,
have to
that
go
is
back to
something
school.
that
What
we're gonna have
happens
to
with
address quickly, yes.
Is it still true that students are not officially enrolled in our district until they actually show up the first day of school?
That is true.
So by not going, they really are not part of a program, but a teacher might have them on their roll. So we can start already seeing numbers pretty quick.
Correct. According to the policy that we have, is that a kid is not considered absent until they have shown the first day of school.
So we might potentially have a lot of families that keep their students home thinking they're gonna be in the virtual program, who are denied for some reason, who send their students the second week of school because they have no other choice,
Yes, sir.
as far as Lamar is concerned. There's a lot of other education choices out there for all taxpayers, but as far as Lamar is concerned,
Yes,
I don't really like that idea.
I understand.
It seems like, and I know it's no fault of Lamar, I don't like the whole idea that this has really come back up for the state and everybody's wanting this at almost at the last minute. This has really been talked about all of a sudden in the last 2 weeks. It just doesn't seem fair to the staff. Doesn't seem fair to the whole way that everything's been structured.
Yeah.
I can assure you, just from our standpoint, that any kid that is going to be in that situation, our schools, our teachers, and our administrators are going to do what they need to do to ensure our kids are learning, and then we fill in those gaps. And so the way that Lamar always does that is works closely with our families, and we would continue to if we're in that situation. I can assure you that.
You'll be able to kind of tell that first day of school what's going on.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
And my other question, if I can real quickly, and I know you probably had some more and I apologize, but how long will a child be allowed to stay in the program if they're struggling? Will they, in of 9 weeks, you'd contact the parents and say this isn't working, or when we just really see it not, them not producing? I mean,
I think
how long can we last that way?
Well, I think 9 weeks is a little late. I think that we start having to look at progress report time and start seeing, again, attendance. We start evaluating the work, providing feedback. We're going to be talking to parents kind of at that halfway point, and then at the second 9 weeks, we're going to have to create some type of documented plan of the things that we're going to do to kind of help and assist the child. And then if they're continuing to struggle at that point, at that fourth or that progress report in that second 9 week period, probably going to have to request from the families to move them back to on-campus learning.
Will they have to sign something that they understand all of this before they start the program?
That will be part of the application process, yes.
Okay.
What will be the school day hours for these students that are in the virtual? I know a lot of teachers last year were working till 11:59 at night, accepting assignments and all that. Will their school day be the same hours as in-person school day? Because I know a lot of teachers last year were doing Zooms while kids are in their car at McDonald's going through drive-through, and
We'll provide a little bit more structure than that, but a lot of the lessons,
Very good.
again,
Yeah.
going back to the virtual model that we're looking at, is going to be a lot of asynchronous learning and not, to some extent, a lot of synchronous learning, which is real-time, two-way. I'm going to be speaking with you every day. I mean, that. And so a lot of that is going to be based also on a computer program with teacher guidance. Also will depend if we do it in the morning and the afternoon is going to be depending upon on the funding that we have, and how many kids that we want to look at accepting and how many teachers we have to teach it. So appropriate staffing is going to affect that.
Can I, just briefly, because we had our budget meeting, I just wanted to discuss, there are some things, we went in depth about the different options that we had, and so some things that might be clear to us that were there might not be clear to everybody else. So we went through and we determined that these are the three options to bring to the board. And Dr. Mosich, correct me if I'm wrong, but the 3.5 million, the 10.5 million, and the 14 million is not, we're not necessarily going out and hiring 33 teachers, 100 teachers, or 133. We're depending on if some of these students are moving from in-person school to virtual education, then those teachers would be reassigned, correct?
Yes, we would have to, but a lot of times I can tell you it doesn't work out that clean. And so with it being majority elementary, there will definitely be some challenges, but you're correct. In the ideal world is that the kids are shifting over here, and then we identify teachers, and then they're going to be teaching in that virtual modality.
And so the 3.5, 10.5, and 14 million is essentially not necessarily what we would use to go and hire those teachers, but the loss that we would see in ADA funding, because we receive funds every time that there's a student on campus, but currently, if they're in virtual learning, we're not receiving any ADA funding from the state. So this is just the offset that we can use ESSER funds for.
Yes, yes, sir.
And we also went through one of the things, Joy, that you alluded to. There's 3 different ESSERs, and there's different phases of ESSER, and we got into the weeds on it. And we went over some of the things that the administration was requesting to use the ESSER funds, things like MAP and different Canvas protocols and things like that, where these funds would come from, and whether that would bump those things off. But one of the things we also determined is that there was about, I think it was 25 million that we can expect in ESSER funding still that is not earmarked or allocated towards anything that we would need to use in the next 3 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
That is correct. We have ESSER 3, the part 2 of ESSER 3, which was 10.886 million, and we still have not used the ESSER 2 funding, which was the 14.5. So that is your 25 million that we still have.
So when we developed these options, we did that knowing that we still want to use, we want to have some of those funds available to offset some of the, the other things that we might be doing, just using general funds, but also these funds are specifically supposed to be used for COVID, and it seems like there's a need now. So really the decision that the budget committee wanted to put forth to the board is how much of that 25 million are we going to put towards virtual education, and that's where you get the 3.5, 10.5, or $14 million options. Did I capture everything?
Yes, sir. Great job.
And also to add to that, thank you, Alex, that was great. At the end of last year, approximately how many students were virtual?
At the elementary level, we're looking at about 4,000. I think that is where the number came up for that last 9 weeks.
And you gave us the number of how much that would have lost if we had.
Yes.
Yeah, last time. It's like 40 or 60 million.
And we need to make a decision Thursday night on which of these fundings we're gonna go with. Is that correct?
No, it's not an action item. We wanted to bring it to you to get some consensus, to see where the board would like to take that direction. But it's not an action item, but I would like to get some input from the board.
So where I struggled with this was being that this, sorry.
Too aggressive.
So where I struggled with this was that this funding, we don't know what additional funding we may or may not receive in the foreseeable future. We don't know if they're gonna come back and say that they are gonna provide us with the funding for virtual, like last year.
Correct. Last year we did
For the
receive
virtual
funding.
students. We don't know how long COVID and the situation we're currently in is going to continue. So front loading and committing too much of this money, I 100% agree that's what this money should be used for. But being that we don't know what we don't know, how much do we commit up front and run the balance down close to zero? And as Jill was going through the finances earlier, payroll's what, 25 million a month?
Yes, sir.
And what's our most expensive item is, I mean, that's what the cost, that's where we're incurring the cost here is the teachers. So that's kind of where I was struggling with this in the budget committee meeting. I essentially agree that it's needed for some students, but the question is, how much do we commit to it? And depending on how long this drags out, there's the potential where you run out. I mean, with the you said 4,000 students, K through 6, virtual?
Yes,
last
sir.
year?
Are we gonna look at how, if some of these are virtual students from last year, how they produced when they were doing virtual? Because you just gave us the report of how much loss we had in some of the grade levels, and then we're trying to take students and put them virtual again. Are we gonna look to see if they were successful?
That is currently not what we would be recommending, based upon the reason that we would provide it.
Okay.
It is those three kind of areas in regard to the immunocompromised of a household member,
Right.
anxiety disorder, and or the fear of the virus.
Which could narrow the amount of students that would actually be accepted into the program. Is that what you're trying to say?
That's the rating system on who would get first dibs at the program.
Okay.
And according to this, applications for this program begin tomorrow?
We were anticipating at that point that that's what we were going to be able to do, but we wanted to have some more board discussion in regard to that, and hopefully we will be communicating with our family, as Dr. Niven said, on Friday.
So since this isn't an action item that we will be voting on, will we just decide this based off of how many students actually apply? Will that, how that be decided, or how we're gonna commit, or say we're going to commit this much?
Yeah, so the whole purpose was just to, exactly like this, to get some dialogue, and so that would give us some guidance as to how far we want to go with it.
Right.
And so one thing we need to be clear about, though, students that are immunocompromised, this is not for them because we can service them through homebound services. And so this is strictly for families who have a concern with sending their children to the school district with the virus being as it is like right now. So they have a family member in the household, they have some anxiety about it, and I forgot the third one.
They would have a diagnosed anxiety disorder as number
Yes,
2.
Yes. So, just right now, this is what the discussion and seeing, where we would like to lean towards that. We got the 4,000 number, as we said earlier, because that's how many students we had in virtual instruction at the elementary level at the end of the school year last year. And so that was a rationale why we picked the number 4,000. And then we just kind of backward map those numbers.
So I would personally like to see us get closer to the 14 million number, where we're servicing about 4,000 students, which is what we were doing at the end of last year. I think that that might not cover all of the parents that apply for the program. But one of the difficulties that we have right now, and we discussed in the budget committee meeting, is although this money is available, every time that we up that number, it's taking funds away from somewhere else that could be helping our students. So it isn't like this money's available and we're choosing whether to use it or not to use it. Whenever we increase that number, it's funds that are taken away from, special needs students or literacy coaches, reading coaches, math coaches. But I do think that it's important to maximize and at least get to 4,000 students, given the fact that our protocols, at least as they're written currently, a lot of families are not satisfied with that, and they feel the need that for their family, they feel that it would be best to keep their children home and learn virtually. And I think that we should be respectful of that and should give them the opportunities to continue to learn virtually. The unfortunate thing is that there's this money we just don't have money from the legislature, and I wish that that we did.
Well, the Senate has come back and passed a bill to allow that, the Texas Senate, but the House is taking a vacation, so it hasn't been able to move forward.
So in the event that the legislature does pass it, then I assume that we could pivot and we would be able to have these funds available.
Yes, sir.
But for right now, my position would be that we try to get as close to that 4,000 student number as we possibly can.
I guess I'm number 3 of the committee, so if you don't mind, did you have something else?
No,
No.
please.
So Mr. Hubenot gave his, Mr. Hunt gave his, so I'll be number 3. So I was the one in the middle, for the 3,000 students. And so, my approach was that we've, as a budget, with our new budget committee, that we were kind of taking a moderate risk, with our budget. And so not risky and not too conservative. And so I felt like out of the 25 million that are not committed, if we did 10 and a half, we allowed up to 10 and a half the first year, and then 7 the second year, and 7 the second year, that would be a moderate approach for the budget. So that's where I'll land. Any other questions?
Well, as the COVID policy is currently, and as we passed on August the 5th, I like the middle approach. And I think Joe has a very good point, because we don't know what's going to happen and what various legislatures may or may not do, and how COVID will continue to impact Lamar and public education. And I think it's wise to keep some of the money on hand. But I think, Joy, I agree with what you said. I think that middle of the road is probably a nice place to shoot for.
Keep in mind, that's only one semester, a dollar amount. It's not a whole year, correct?
Yes, sir. It's not a whole year. It's only a semester.
But we're not offering a whole year, we're only offering.
First semester.
First semester, the second 9 weeks.
I have a question. So if we go with the whatever, 3,000, 4,000, whatever, we're cutting it off.
Yes.
3,001 comes and we're like, sorry. That's
Yes.
it? Okay. Just curious what happens at 3,001. Okay.
We will be very intentional about publicizing it and marketing it and making sure our communications team gets it out in well enough time for people that have an interest in it to be able
really,
to get
when
the
the
application
deadline
done.
is.
You're right. You know what the deadline is. We will over communicate it. But again, as I've said publicly, no matter what we do, we're going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And so, but we do need to do something to assist families that are concerned. And so, this is our best effort.
I'm pretty comfortable with the middle number myself. The 3,000 students
You mentioned
for
something.
one semester.
You mentioned something earlier about the teachers trying to utilize our existing staff. Ideally, I guess it'd be great if a certain number of kids, 60 kids out of one school, you could grab that set amount of teachers. In the event we have to take on additional staff to facilitate this, that number does go up, correct?
Yes, sir. That number would increase.
And just to be clear, none of the teachers are under this proposal will have to do hybrid teaching, right?
Correct. None of them would.
Yeah, we're going to be committed. It's tough is not the word, or difficult is not even the word. I don't even know the right word to say. But to ask a teacher to do that again, to do virtual and in-person instruction, is pretty hard to do. It's next to impossible to ask someone to do that and do a great job at it and could be 100% effective in all the students they touch. So we're going to be committed to the teachers in this program being asynchronous solely, and then the other teachers to be in-person solely.
And we also have funding, just to add, I don't know if we talked about this, maybe you did, but if somebody has to leave school for sickness, we are funded for the quarantine period. That's separate funds as well.
You're talking about the remote conferencing?
Yes.
That's right now.
That.
Yeah.
She's about to go
Oh,
later.
all right.
You mentioned remote conferencing, so.
Great lead in.
I was playing.
A great
it all
lead way.
along, yeah.
This is something that TEA, with the state of where we are with COVID, has allowed for. And so I wanted to do a brief kind of review of what this particularly is. So on August 5th, TEA did announce some adjustments to the student accounting handbook to allow some flexibility for us to use describing remote conferencing. And so this change will allow the districts to count that instruction and time for student attendance purposes, for funding purposes, provided the following requirements are met. So we can get it funded if these things are met. Student is unable to attend school because of a temporary medical condition, and right now we're looking at COVID being that medical condition. The total amount of remote conferencing instruction does not exceed more than 20 days. And so this is for every student. There's only 20 days in the year that it's allotted, 10 and then 10, whether they're quarantined. If it's longer than that, then we would have to apply for a waiver with TEA. As we look at this, the student has to have a positive test result for a communicable disease. Our focus right now as we launch this would be for COVID only. There are some other diseases that we could also be inclusive of, but we want to focus on our COVID response first. The student has to be identified as having close contact, so they can, for 10 for close contact, but again, the maximum is 20 days. There are some expectations within remote conferencing. So students in grades pre-K through 5 must receive the equivalent of 4 hours of instruction, with at least 2 of those hours being synchronous. And then it flips for secondary students that they have to have 4 hours of synchronous instruction in the remote conferencing. Attendance will be generated on, are you there? Are you virtually present? And so there at that attendance period. And then this must be provided synchronously, either in that 2 or 4 hour segments. And it does not have to be, it cannot be concurrent. We asked about hybrid teaching. This cannot be a concurrent method of teaching. Our next steps, currently right now, we are reviewing actually some long-term subs, our guest instructors of $200 a day for this position. We are determining and finalizing any technology needs, finalizing purchases for programming needs, and then processes and procedures will be finalized by the end of this week. Do you have any questions on remote conferencing?
Wow. So to sum up, you're looking for more teachers to maybe do this, possibly teachers to do our virtual, and we need people to help tutor the kids who didn't pass STAR.
Yes, ma'am.
Good luck.
Are these like substitute? Would these be subs or are these teachers?
Currently, right now, we are looking at substitutes.
Okay.
And so long-term substitutes,
subs.
and it would be $200 a day as guest instructors.
Gotcha. And they all have to be certified teachers to do these?
Not necessarily. They have to be just those that meet our sub qualifications.
Okay.
But we are vetting this week on the current guest instructors that have applied.
Thank you, Dr. Muffin.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Vosick, are there any public comments?
Yes, Madam Chairman. If you wish to address the board, you must fill out a card and submit it before the presiding officer calls the meeting to order. While speakers generally have 5 minutes to address the board, the presiding officer may establish an overall time limit for public comment and adjust the time allotted to each speaker when necessary to accommodate a large number of speakers. However, no speaker shall be given less than 1 minute. While the board values hearing from members of the public, trustees may not respond to comments as they are prohibited by law from discussing or deciding any subject that is not on the board's publicly noticed agenda. Speakers having complaints against individual district employees or trustees may only address the board after filing a complaint form and in the manner provided for in the applicable board policy, DGBA for employee complaints, F and G for student and parent complaints, and GF for public complaints. The presiding officer or designee shall determine whether a speaker has filed a complaint according to the policy. Any speakers who complain of individual district employees or trustees during public comment will be directed by the presiding officer to stop addressing the board and will refer the speaker to the appropriate complaint policy. As you come forward, please state your name. Our first speaker is Heather Foster.
Good evening. My name is Heather Foster, and I'm the parent of an 8th grader at Reading Junior High. When I spoke here on August 5th, I expressed my concern that the proposed 2021-2022 COVID-19 protocols were not sufficient to protect our students, faculty, and staff. Over these past 2 weeks, we have seen the positive cases of COVID-19 infection rise in our community. For example, Fort Bend ISD students returned to school last Wednesday, August 11th, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, they are reporting 553 positive cases, 452 of which are students. Fort Bend currently has similar safety procedures to LCISD, including optional masking. Our county judge and Health and Human Services Department have implemented mask mandates throughout the county buildings and paved the way for the local school boards to do the same. Our children return to school in less than a week, and I am standing here representing parents and students who are pleading with you to do all you can to keep them safe. You must do everything possible to help stop the transmission of COVID-19, especially among our most vulnerable. Students under 12 who are not yet eligible to be vaccinated, the immunocompromised, and other students, faculty, and staff who have not been fully vaccinated. This school district knows what to do. We were successful last year. This is not the time to give up. At a minimum, we ask you for a universal mask mandate for all school facilities, including buses, a virtual learning option for all who want it in kindergarten through 6th grade, and I do agree with Mr. Hunt that a place for 4,000 students still may not serve all of the students who need that option. We also ask for social distancing in classrooms, hallways, and especially during meals in the cafeteria. Use air purifiers and outside air ventilation whenever possible. Implement contact tracing. And all exposures should be required to quarantine for 10 days or 7 days with a negative test taken after day 5, as per CDC quarantine guidelines. There should be no penalty for excessive absences while quarantined, understanding that both students and staff could face multiple exposures this year. When the county's COVID-19 risk level is at orange or red, no visitors should be allowed on campus during school hours unless they are essential. For example, parents should not be allowed to eat lunch with the students during an orange or red level risk. Please encourage vaccination. The county mobile unit is available upon request. Houston Independent School District has asked TEA for permission to pay each district employee $500 to get fully vaccinated. That may be something that you would like to consider. Finally, the disease mitigation procedures that Lamar Consolidated followed last year worked. You all know how to keep our community safe. Now is the time to act.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Cantu.
Good evening.
Can you wait just one
Sure.
second? We're just gonna move the computer, Susan. Sorry, thank you.
That's all right.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Jennifer Cantu. And first of all, I'd like for y'all to look at your mission statement where you state you have passion for people, you have your plan for success, and your website says that Lamar CISD will always focus on putting students first. That is what I'm asking as a mother that has children that are under the age of 12 that are not eligible to be vaccinated. We know that last year when you implemented the programs where every child needed to wear a mask, where teachers were required to wear a mask, parents felt safe that at the beginning of the year where there was maybe 9,000 students that were not in class and were doing virtual learning, that decreased to the 4,000 that we had at the end of the school year. We know it's important
we just stated, one of the individuals stated that there's going to be a requirement to be eligible to be in this virtual program. Not the immunocompromised, because as you stated, Mr. Welch, those are already helped by homebound. But those that might have anxiety, but it was very specific. They have to have a medical doctor that has diagnosed them with anxiety. Well, Superintendent, you just stated a while ago that we're not Katy, we're not Conroe. The reality is that a large proportion of our families are those of lower socioeconomic status. More importantly, that might not have affordable and accessible health care. For a child that does have Medicaid, which is, as we know in Lamar Consolidated, more than 42% of our population, their wait time to see a child psychiatrist is 8 months. So they would never meet your criteria, which would mainly say that it wouldn't be fair. You can't say you will always put our students first, yet you're putting all these obstacles to become eligible. Each and every one of you took an oath. Each and every single one of you are here to stand and protect our children. I know many of you individually, and I asked that last year we showed great success when we implemented strategies. The CDC guidelines clearly state that any child older than 2 years old should wear a mask. It states it. We are currently in a level red. What else needs to happen? Our current governor has COVID, and now he's choosing to he's going to quarantine. So we know that wearing a mask does protect our children. I ask that you think about it. I know the decision is not done. I know we have the temporary restraining order on Thursday, but let's be proactive, because when Lamar Consolidated is proactive, we do best. Heck, we're number 4 and number 5th in so many categories. Let's be first in Fort Bend County. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jason Nichols.
Good evening to the board, Dr. Nevins as well. My name is Dr. Jason Nichols. I'm a pediatric hospitalist. I too am wanting to petition the board to reconsider some of the decisions that have been made. I'm listening to Mr. Hunt as he brought up the position of having 4,000 students to be considered, and echoing some of the concerns of previous individuals who have spoken. I think as we look at these numbers moving forward, the perspective I have, obviously being a member of the community, a parent, but also a physician. When we are running out of beds, ventilators, ECMO units for patients, very few people know what that's like. I've been on that side where I have to tell a parent, I don't have a bed. We don't have vents. That is not a position we want to be in. I wish I could say, looking at the numbers, they're going to get better. Tomorrow it's going to disappear. I have a 6-year-old, can't be vaccinated. We've heard these things. We're not asking for this to be indefinite. I think most people are just wanting for this to get over. We can have vaccines in our children and eventually reintroduce them to normal life. We are asking urgently for you to reconsider these positions and open it up. I understand the budgetary constraints. These are difficult times on all of us, children included. That being said, we know we're coming into flu season. This is my busiest time of year ramping up with respiratory illnesses, excluding COVID. No mask mandates, no vaccines. You look across the country, we have experiments that we've seen with colleges last year. We've seen it when we opened up last year. Please reconsider these decisions. Just asking that you consider these children, put the families first, put our communities first, and come up with options that will at least be open to more than that minimum, more than the 3,000 that you mentioned. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rebecca Clark.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Clark. I have 4 kiddos. Well, I have 3 kiddos in LCISD. 1 graduated Fulshire High School. I'll tell you about that. I didn't prepare any comments for tonight. I'm saving that for Thursday, so I just scripted these on the fly. But I wanted to make some observations based on my experience and a lot of due diligence that I've done over the last year, even probably a little more than that, and some what I've heard tonight. So as I said, I have 4 children, one of whom graduated Fulshire High School in 2020, the top 7% of her class, and she's currently studying biomedical science at Texas A&M. I can testify that virtual learning has been a great struggle for her, was a great struggle for her. She did that the last half of her year as a senior, and then all last year at Texas A&M. There was only a couple classes that were in person. Particularly as it relates to math and sciences, like we saw, but not exclusively those subjects. She started at age 3 getting speech services. She has hearing and speech difficulties. She was in KDISD, then went into SPED services in KDISD and continued on in SPED as we moved into LCISD. I can't even imagine how she would have excelled the way she did in this situation like this, especially with those disabilities, but even without. Not being able to see teachers' mouths, not being able to properly move her mouth or even breathe with all her ENT issues, adenoids, so forth and so on. Further, she had to learn social skills, and she's on the spectrum, on the very low end, whatever that means. It's mild, but social issues were huge for her as well. And that required face-to-face interaction daily. And she struggled a lot with being bullied and made fun of because of her speech and just her inability to read social cues, and it was so critical to her. Okay. My other children are currently in LCISD. I have a senior at Fulshire High School, I have a 2nd grader, and a kindergartner starting at Bentley. My senior struggled a lot when online was the only option, and even when he was able to go in person, which he did as soon as he was able. He was in SPED also, up until 9th grade when he opted to go down to 504, because he feels like I want to give kudos to the SPED department, 504, and the teachers we've had. I'm just really thankful for them. Math made it harder for him than normal. And sorry, like I said, this was impromptu. I also want to address the virtual learning at the junior high and high school level. I want to tell you firsthand that cheating is a regular occurrence, on the regular, on the daily. Kids talked about it all the time. I heard phone calls, I saw texts. I'm vigilant about that, and my kids don't do it, but I bird dog that. So we talked about it. I even saw a text that said, "Man, I'm doing virtual so I can get my GPA up." Just FYI. That bothered me because the kids in person weren't allowed to look at notes. They weren't allowed to Google on their phones down below. And anyone who says that doesn't happen, and I'm talking prolifically, is fooling themselves. That affects class rank, that affects scholarships, college entry, and that's just that side of it. I'll go more into how the research I've done on Thursday night, but I just want to say that you can connect the dots based on what I've heard and postulate that the decrease in scores can at least be in part attributed to some of these things. I don't think that's a far reach. And it's like I tell my kids, just because something's permissible doesn't mean it's beneficial. And I mean that about, and in regard to the oath you took it to my kids too, okay? So it's not just one person's kids and what they think, and we can't just spout off, I'm not saying anybody here spouted off, I'm saying we can't just give our opinions without validation or substantiating of those claims. So anybody who comes with those needs to come with the documents that back that up, which I will do. So I want to thank you guys for the changes in the policy you made earlier this month, and I believe they are very important for the success of our students this upcoming year. So I'll see you again Thursday.
Thank you.
That's all, Madam Chairman.
All right, do we have anything else on the information items? We're done? Okay. We are not going into closed session this evening. So that's it. It is now 8:35 PM. We are, nope, just kidding, we're, no further business. I do that every time. Meeting is adjourned, it's 8:35 PM.